Well, as we are just starting, Marcia, welcome, and everybody on the line, I want to really welcome you and thank you for making time in your day or in your evening to join us for the first session of the Awareness IQ series. And Marcia, I'm going to talk a little bit about you in a minute. I'm so excited to have you. I'm speaking on behalf of the Gestalt Center for Coaching in Istanbul and advanced trainings in Toronto. And we call this series the Awareness IQ series to make very clear that there's a new phenomenon in the world, and that is, how do we recognize in the moment issues related to our values or creativity or emotional range or personal or interpersonal connection, or issues of voice and communication, or issues of deep knowing and intuition, or how we scan the field. And from all of that, how do we respond to those issues to provide what is needed, wanted, or missing? Because when we don't respond in the moment, we will feel regret instead of satisfaction. This and actually what I've just described is the elements of dealing with awareness. And when we respond in a way that satisfies that need, we have used our awareness IQ with satisfaction. And yay, isn't that what we're all about? This first session with Marcia Reynolds is so exciting because Marcia, I'm going to just tell you, is fascinated by the brain, especially issues related to connection, commitment, and possibility. She uses research to really help leaders be more effective and have meaningful conversations. And she uses executive coaching and her training programs. And get this, she's offered that in 38 countries in our world. She's a recognized pioneer in the coaching profession and is one of the first members and the 5th global president of the ICF Federation. And this year is back on their board as a global director. She's also the past president of the Association for Coach Training organization known as ACTO, where I had the joy of working with her for a year when I was a director there. And she's also the director of training for Healthcare Coaching Institute at Virginia Tech and on faculty for the International Coach Academy in Russia and Create Coaching in China. Interviews with Marcia come from her book, Outsmart the Brain, or Wonder Woman, or The Discomfort Zone, How Leaders Turn Difficult Conversations into Breakthroughs. And she has appeared in Wall Street Journal, ABC News, Fast Companies, and Psychology Today. I like to call Marcia, though she's just about an inch shorter than me and I'm short, one of those people that shows that stature in the world is not about physical size. She's big and she's one of our rock stars, and I think she always has something really interesting to share with us, particularly around this dilemma that in discomfort there is learning, and Marcia has the wherewithal to take us deeper into that area. So Marcia, I turn to you with welcome and great appreciation. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. So I want to just start by sharing what got me into doing the research that I'm going to talk about today. I was actually talking to my publisher and I said, I think I need to write a coaching book. It seems that all these coaches I'm working with all over the world, that regardless of where they were excellent coaches, and they would bring their client to a certain space and then back off. And many times I would say, did you notice that this happened with your client? And they'd say, oh, absolutely. And I said, well, why didn't you say something? Why didn't you just share what you noticed? Well, I don't think it was good to do it. I mean, they had every excuse in the world why they wouldn't do this. And it was that unwillingness to just tip them over the edge just a little bit. So I said this to my publisher and he said, well, write the book for leaders because the coaches will buy it anyway. and that it is an important piece for leaders. And so that's why when I wrote it, it has the inclination for leadership, but it really is a coaching book. And it was all about this space that not just that we get in as coaches, but what is it that we're trying to create in order for there to be learning and breakthrough. So the statement that I came up with when I was writing this was that the best coaches make us feel unsure of ourselves. And when I would say that, I would say to people, like, how does this make you feel? And if you want, if you have a question at any time, please write it in the chat. And you can even write your responses in the chat. But there were so many different reactions I would get to this statement. Most people felt uncomfortable even just by saying it. So some people like, oh yeah, this is exciting. Or some people it scared them, or nah, I'm not sure, or they'd be confused, or maybe another reaction. And I'd always say this isn't about not making people feel confident. We often say coaches need to encourage, they need to build people up so they feel, safe and courageous enough to move forward. Well, yes, that's true. But even prior to that, what's even going to motivate them? Why would they even want to move forward? So it's really important to look at, before we go into this, to look within yourself. So as Dorothy said, that discomfort zone is required for learning. And so I know you've had this in your training, but to even ask yourself in those moments, how comfortable are you? I came upon this amazing piece of work that this guy, Josh Steinfeld, did for his master's thesis. And he went out and interviewed hundreds of coaches, both beginning coaches and experienced coaches, and just asked them, what are your greatest fears? And he came up with this amazing list, and I just pulled a few. And the most common responses were, well, I'm afraid of harming a client, or that I would create negative emotions. What happens if they yell at me, or they get mad at me, or that I would ruin somebody? One of my favorite things is to tell people that nobody ever died from coaching. That sometimes they may disagree with you, or they could be angry with you. But if we're afraid that they may have a bad reaction, and they may even fire us, that we won't go to that level to tip them over into that space of uncertainty where we can learn, where we really know. Now, he did find that there was a difference, that the beginners and the experienced coaches really said the same fears, but the experienced coaches said that if they continued to work on their own personal development, that allowed them to be more emotionally and mentally stronger, so they could hold the space for the learning to occur in those moments of discomfort. So the question is really, when you're looking, it's the word challenge often comes up, and people will say, oh, I don't want to challenge my clients. And I particularly find this in Asia, the whole, well, I can't put them in that space. I can't be direct. So we first often look at the word challenge. What does that really mean? And I say it's not about critiquing or advising or pushing your client. It's just that willingness to share something that will challenge their thinking, and that it will. So my favorite competency of the ICF competencies is really direct communication. Of course, I love questions, but oftentimes people forget the power of just holding up the mirror, of just reflecting, here's what I saw, or I heard, or I noticed. And then ask the question, so that it makes them stop and think about their thinking, so they question themselves, even if it feels uncomfortable. I love the ICF definition of coaching. It starts by saying that we are their partner. And I believe that, yes, we are the thinking partner. We're not the advisors. We're not telling them what to do. We partner with them to think and help them to think beyond what they see in this moment. But the other part of the definition says that the client is creative, resourceful, and whole. So when we remember they're creative, resourceful, and whole, when you hold up this mirror, you're not going to break them. That they don't need to be fixed, that we trust that they can actually cope with seeing themselves. that sometimes it's just the subtle shift. You know, I was doing a demo with a manager that was talking about his own uncomfortable conversation that he had to have with an employee who wasn't doing well as a manager, and he may have to demote her. And then all of a sudden he looked down slightly and said, but I thought she was going to be the one. And I know she's going to like really freak out when I tell her this. And just that moment for me, just saying, stop for a second. What happened as you look down? I almost felt a sadness in you saying that. And he paused, and then he looked at me and said, I think I promoted her too soon. So by me just noticing the shift that put him into a place where he could speak his truth, as uncomfortable as it was, actually shifted the conversation. And so this is particularly useful when your client is circling, you know, when you get right up to that point and they start like changing the subject and going off over here, and then possibly, you know, let's talk about something else, or they show this resistance. And it happens all the time. You know, as you're just getting in there, they tend to want to go off somewhere else. That we hold them to this space. We hold them to the direction that we're going to, you know, and stay with the noticing and the questions without getting sidetracks. Because at that moment, they need a transformational, not transactional conversation with you. And this is the power of coaching. Sometimes we have it is just transactional. What are you doing? What have you tried? What other possibilities have you considered? What are the pros? What are the cons? I mean, sometimes people just need to talk. And sometimes we're just a sounding board, and then they think it through, and that's great, you know, especially if they're a verbal processor. But in particular, those times when they are really stuck or they're resisting, this is the moment that you need to help them pop through their thinking. So I don't even say, yeah, maybe shift them, but sometimes we have to pop through their barriers. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that when I say pop through their barriers. I want you to understand what we're aiming for and why this is significant, and why I believe that coaching is the best behavioral change technology we have. And I've been studying behavioral change since the late 1980s. My second master's was in adult learning. And I'm fascinated by what does it take for people to really change. And I was a trainer all those years in companies doing communications and leadership training. And I knew that they would go through a class and they would love it, and then go out and back and do the same thing that they always did, right? So what would it take? Well, we knew that coaching would help people stay accountable to their practice, and that was a good thing. But there's something else in coaching that really makes the difference, that creates this transformational moment. So I want to take a look at what I'm talking about here is this thing called insight formation. How is new awareness really created in the brain? And then I'm going to give you some ideas of how to practice to actually pick up at a deeper level. What is it that you're sensing from this person that they're not quite telling you, that you might share as you hold up the mirror and question what you see and what you sense? So many of you know that there's we have three brains. So this is when we came out with the whole brain scans in the mid-90s, and then we started writing about this, and Daniel Goleman came out with his work, and we talked about the primitive brain, the social brain, the thinking brain. Well, what's significant about this is that there's three different memory centers. So in each part of the brain, we have a different memory center, which means we have different learning. And so what we're talking about here is learning new behaviors, which is different than just learning a set of facts. So I want to look at each of these centers and just demonstrate, like, how do people learn, and what's the difference then when we get to coaching. I think this is really important for all coaches to know, because when you're dealing with companies, that it's like, well, why is coaching important? Why should we invest in this? We do training. I think it's really important that you can differentiate. What's the difference between training and mentoring and coaching, and what's the power of coaching if they really want their people to change? And that's how I, first got into this, and then looking at really understanding. It helps me to have the courage to be able to move through the discomfort zone instead of backing off. So first we have the critical thinking, and this is fact-based learning, and I'm sure most of you, when you went through school, this is the way that you were taught, right? They give you a bunch of facts and then they quiz you, and so since I can see you all, I want to know if those quizzes that you had in school, if I gave you those quizzes today, would you be able to pass them? Shake your head, yes or no. No, I see no, no, no. Unless you had a photographic memory, which some people do, we don't remember. Because what's happening at the cortical brain is the memory is called short-term memory, right? But we forget what that means. And so we're constantly telling people, oh, you should go do this. This is a good thing. I mean, leaders still do this to this day. And the problem, so not only is it short-term, but it keeps getting shorter and shorter and shorter all the time, right? I mean, attention spans are like, doop, 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 doop. And so you tell somebody something, wow, this is really good, you should go do this. And they even say, yeah, you're right, I'll go do that. And then they walk away from you and they, pick up their phone and start doing their email. And somebody calls them, and then they go back to their desk, and it's like all this stuff they have to do. And how long do they remember? So the most inefficient way of getting people to change is by telling them. And not only do they not remember unless it's repeated, like you did in school, but there has to be an emotion that's attached to information in order for people to remember what it is that they're told, or what they read in an article, or what they see somewhere. So it has to be like a really powerful emotion where they go, wow, this is fascinating. Wow, let me go tell my friends, and then they tell other people, they talk about it. And again, there needs to be some repetition, because what happens when we go to sleep at night, your brain says, okay, short-term memory pool, what's there? And, only one or two of these things I'm going to take out and put into your long-term memory. The rest of it, forget it. You're going to forget it. And it only will be those things that you absolutely had an emotional reaction to, because that says it's important enough. But even if I remember this, that you told me this, I think it's awesome, and I remember it, it doesn't necessarily change my behavior. So again, I'm going to ask you, and you can shake your head yes or no. How many of you absolutely know you should be doing something and you're not doing it? Shake your head. Yes, yes. No, see. I know I'm setting you up, but you see, the thing is, information doesn't change behavior. It just doesn't change behavior. Because I know I'm supposed to do something doesn't mean I'll do it. And we know this in the medical field, that people will be told, if you do not do this, you will die. And they will do it maybe for a week, and then they'll find some great rationalization why they're not going to do it anymore, even if they die. So, giving people consequences, if you don't do this, this will happen, that doesn't even work. So information doesn't change behavior. We have to have another way of shifting the brain in order for there to be long-term behavioral change. So I might remember that I should be doing this and why, but that doesn't mean I'm going to do it. And so then we have this reptilian brain, and what's lodged down there is fear-based learning, and it's pretty permanent, so it's efficient in terms of me remembering. If I'm afraid of something, it's likely that I'll do it. But the problem with fear-based learning is it bypasses the middle brain, and creativity gets lodged into the primitive brain and becomes very fixed behavior. So if I tell you, you must do this or else, and I'm like, oh, and it freaks me out. And then I go do it. And then you come back to me and say, oh, you know what I told you last month? We're now going to change. My brain's going to say, no way. No way, because you taught me this. I learned by fear, and I'm not going to change it. So what we have at this level is very resistant behavior. And we talk about we need agile environments. We need leaders to be flexible, to change their mind. It's not going to happen if you scare them into learning. And, again, many of us learn this way. And I always say when we have downturns in the economy, it gives leaders an excuse for bad behavior. and they go back to fear, and then we come out of it, oh, we want to change, and they've already created a problem for themselves. So it's efficient in learning, but not in flexible behavior change. So we don't want to tell people, we don't want to scare them, and this is like really important. And again, all those times you have an urge to tell people what to do as a coach, we all do. Or to do the, well, what's the worst that could happen type thing, that could work. But again, you want to be careful about how you use these in terms of their learning. So what we have then, what's left then in the social brain is where we have long-term memory and emotions. But there's also something else there that's really critical. And this is what we're looking to reach when we coach. And that's this thing called ego. And the thing about ego is we all have ego. You have ego, I have ego. We have big fat egos. We have to. And so it's not a bad thing. We've given ego a very bad rap. Ego is my sense of self and how I see the world. And I have to have a sense of self and how I see the world, or I cannot function. Yeah, I need to know when I wake up in the morning who I am and what I'm doing there. Although sometimes when I travel, I get confused. But it's really important that I have this structure that says, this is how I see the world. This is my belief system, because it defines who I am and what I'm going to be doing and how I see things and the choices that I make. The thing is, because this is so critical to my everyday functioning, I dearly protect it. So I have this wall around how I see the world, right or wrong, things that the way I see that things should be, and how I should be. And oftentimes this is the resistance that you'll sense when we say we get into the discomfort zone, because when people feel you're getting really close to this wall of who I think I am and how I see the world, they will, it's like, no, I have to protect this. But yet, when you actually make that reflection and ask that question, that makes them stop and question, wow, why do I do that? Why do I think that way? Then we can actually put a crack in this wall. And the moment that we crack it, the brain then has to rewire to make sense of what's going on, because the brain is a meaning-making machine, and it must make sense. It can't leave you in confusion. That's why, when you see things in the distance, you say, oh, that's what it is. And then you find as you get closer that you were totally wrong. And that's okay. The brain just needs to define it. So what we're aiming for, this insight-based learning, is a crack in the wall of our ego. And the moment you can crack, then, there's a chance that the person then can look at it. Normally, they don't. If you look at the behavioral economists like Daniel Kahneman and the neuroscientists like Michael Gazzaniga that look at ego structure, they will tell you, we do not turn inward to see these walls, this definition. We just don't do this. We possibly could to a certain degree, but because we have this great big protection, we usually will rationalize this before we will truly question. And the example that Kahneman gives is try to tickle yourself. And if you try to tickle yourself, you'll see that you can't, because the brain says, I know what you're doing. It's the same thing when we say, oh, I'll coach myself. Well, you can if it's not that big of a deal, but you can't if it's really a part of how you see yourself in the world. But in order for there to be long-term behavioral change, I must change how I see myself and the world. Otherwise, I will not stick to this change. But once I see myself in the world differently, it's like my behavior actually naturally changes. And I will commit to that change. So when we're looking for long-term behavioral change, we're really trying to break through that wall. So we can see things as we are. Because, we create our reality anyway. So my sense of myself in the world is just my reality creation. So if I can stop and see that by an external disruptor, which is you, the coach, then there's a chance that I'll break through and shift that. So I see things differently. So what breaks through that wall of protection around who I think I am in the world could be a surprising fact. So there's times when somebody said, did you know this? And in coaching, it's okay to give people information. We just don't give them advice. It's two different things. So sometimes when people are going off and I say, wow, did you know? And if it is a surprising fact, sometimes that's enough to go, wow, I had no idea. Like, Dorothy and I often talk about my second book is called Wonder Woman. And it was my doctoral research on high achieving women in the workplace. And I did it because I thought something was wrong with me. I thought I was crazy. And then I did this research and found there's a lot of us out there that are a little not the norm. And particularly the high achieving assertive women. And I have so many women around the world that email me and say, thank you. I thought something was wrong with me till I read your book. And now I realize that other people are like me too. That's a surprising fact. That was important to them to realize that it wasn't that there was something wrong with them, that they were actually similar to hundreds and thousands of other women, which kind of made them feel okay. And so they weren't always putting themselves down. They realized, wow, this is the base I need to work from, not to make it go away. That was important. So sometimes a surprising fact can break through. And if not, then what we use is called a disruptive reflection. So again, it's a disruptive process. And you don't intend to be disruptive, but oftentimes just, again, sharing with people, I'm curious, when you talked about this option and then shifted to talking about this option, your emotions totally shifted. Did you notice your own shift in how you were talking about these emotions? That could be a disruptive reflection. If you say, wow, you were really excited about this, but your energy really dropped over here. Sounds to me that you've already made your decision. Is that true? That even that, we'll often get the, yeah, I really want to do this, but then we can explore the but. What is that really that's stopping you from moving forward with what you want to do? So oftentimes what we call a powerful question is simply the question that follows the reflection that makes them stop and think and question themselves. So we call this transformation because what happens is when we crack that protective wall around the ego, that's when that light of awareness can actually break through, where they see, oh, right, I have been doing that. And they immediately see the impact on themselves and others. And this new truth or new insight about themselves or the world around them can actually get through. And this is far more powerful than saying, oh, you're missing the point, or you don't see this, or giving them feedback on, when you do this, you're annoying, that type of thing, is that they have to understand for themselves what it is that's motivating that, or what it is they're trying to achieve that they're just not getting. So transformation in coaching is when there's a new truth or new meaning that comes from the break in knowing. So when Dorothy said that learning comes from discomfort, from that moment of discomfort, when we break through at that moment, it's not going to feel comfortable for them, because all of a sudden they will see themselves in a different light. And they recognize the impact on themselves or others that they have been creating and rationalizing for a very long time. So learning happens in the moment of uncertainty, when they're not sure that what they knew to be the right thing, they start to question. So it's that moment of uncertainty that we're looking for, because that allows them to look. If they already know why they do what they do, if they already know that other people are wrong and or whatever, I can't change, you can't deal with the knowing. You want to create the unknowing for them to then be able to see new possibilities. So when their view of their self in the world changes, they then see what they need to do, and they can't go back. They can't go back. This is the change that we're looking for that becomes permanent. But you still need to get them to articulate what they now see. Because oftentimes this is what you're going to get in coaching. They'll go, oh, wow, yeah, oh, yeah, now I see what I need to do now. Okay, good, thank you. And you still need to say, what is it that you now see? What is it that just emerged for you? They still must articulate this new awareness, but to know exactly then what you might ask them, what will you do next? And then you build on that for the steps and the actions. Because they may have the new awareness, but really not quite sure what to do. It becomes blurry after that. So it must be articulated. So, you know, in the ICF competencies, when they say new awareness, it's when you ask them, what did you just learn? What just came to light for you? What just emerged is an important question, because we must hear what that new awareness is before you move into action. And I've seen over and over, coaches forget. They're like, yeah, okay, great. Yeah, you got something new. Yay. And they will often end the session there. And I'm like, no. You got to close it out. What did you now see? So what will you do with that? You know, what does that mean to you? You know, we build on that. So I just want to stop. Dorothy, has there been any questions that have come through? Or do you have any questions, anybody? And you're muted, Dorothy. Can I unmute?
Of course, thank you. This comes from Gustavo, who likes, thank you, Gustavo, who likes the term serendipity as to discover those ahas. And I think actually, Marcia, if you could just talk about that moment, you know, this is just a great moment for, you've linked transformation, new learning, and awareness together. And new learning is that moment of the new aha. Gustavo's calling serendipity. I call it the miracle, the magic, the moment.
Right.
Really, you have to kind of capture that. And that's the art of our work. Could you and I know that's the moment that we all, how can we become more skilled at capturing, including just that, and also the other thing is how to create hope in that moment of discomfort rather than shame. Okay?
Yeah.
I'll give you that.
I've got some slides coming up, but I want to just explain it here. First off, when this happens, because there's going to be this, definitely this recognition of something that they have, we call it a blind spot, but the brain creates it to be a blind spot because it is so powerful. And it's something that will affect us when we recognize the truth. So in that moment, here's what's going to happen. You're going to make the reflection, you're going to ask the question, and then for a moment, they're going to stare at you. They're going to give you this blank stare. And I was in this session in South Korea, these coaches, they were talking about breakthrough moments. And every single one of them said, yeah, the person kind of gave me this like, huh? for just a moment. And, what's happening is when I said it breaks through the ego structure is the brain says, oh no, this does not compute. And you actually takes the brain offline, and they've seen this in creativity, that aha moment, that the brain kind of goes completely quiet for a moment because it's going, oh, I have to rewire. And so I call it the baby stare. When babies see something for the very first time, they go, huh? And then they laugh or they cry when they say, oh, is this going to hurt me or is this funny? But adults do it too. They're going to give you that look, and it might be just for a brief moment, and then they will have an emotional reaction. And it could be anything from embarrassment, as you said, shame. They could cry. They could scream at you. I had this one woman who, she just loved to scream at me, and she even hung up on me once. But I knew the pattern. It's like the moment she saw herself, she was just going to scream at me. and then she'd call me back. Okay, fine, I'm ready. So the point is, this is the moment where we hold this space. We hold the space of safety for them to go through the process that they must go through. And we do not jump in. The worst you can do is if they have an emotional reaction and you're like, oh, don't feel so badly, or whatever it is that you jump in to make them feel better. Do not do that, because you're disrupting the process and you weaken them when you do that. You want to just allow the process to transform, and they will come out of whatever emotion they're experiencing if you just hold a safe space, a comfortable silence. So we use our breathing, and love them through the process, and they will come through, and then you can move forward. So it's really critical here that this is where you then manage your own discomfort. With whatever emotional reaction you have. So if you remember when I showed you the coaching fears, that they will have an emotional reaction. And I always say, yay, good. They should have an emotional reaction. You don't want to make them happy all the time. And I'm not, again, of course, I don't mean that I want you to hurt, to make them have a reaction, but just know that the reaction is an indication that learning is occurring. And if we remember that the reaction is an indication that learning is occurring, then you allow that process to happen. So the thing is that in doing this, that one of the things that I then came upon in the research, for the book was that there's a way of listening that not only would allow you to hear things that they're not articulating well, to pick up that sense of what's really going on here, but it also creates this sense of psychological safety to where they're willing to be vulnerable with you. And that's the work around full body presence. That yes, we need to go into this conversation with our emotional intention. So you need to think about what is it that I'm feeling in this moment? And I'm going to go through that in just a moment, because you will use these emotions to open up your nervous system. And always to remember, the person is, when I say highest regard, they're creative, resourceful, and whole. They do not need you to fix them. And whatever they're going through is just fine. It's a part of their development. So as I'm sure, that because I know Dorothy is definitely teaches the work around opening up the nervous system, that when we're practicing coaching, we're thinking of skills, and so we often get really stuck in our head, and that's normal. We all do that. But when we can come to trust that I know this foundation of coaching and I can release my brain, then we could come to open our heart and allow a receiving from our heart. And a lot of times people will stop there, like there's the work of the Heart Math Institute. But we forget that when you look at this nervous system, there's 3 organs attached to the vagus nerve that are constantly talking to each other. So it's the head, the heart, and the gut. And your gut has over 500 million neurons, and every class of neurotransmitter that connects the neurons to create thought lives in the gut. So we need to be able to listen to what we are actually picking up before it sends it to the brain and censors it. So we open our nervous system in order to pick things up. But the wonderful thing about this is now there's a lot of research in the therapy field. They call this therapeutic presence when you use the vagus circuit, which is opening up your nervous system. That when we do this and we're listening, and of course there's my neighbor doing lawn work now.
Marcia,
yeah,
we don't hear the mower, but you are cutting through something.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't hear. I can just say it doesn't do it. But in this moment, you referenced the vagus nerve, and I just want to say for everybody, one of the things the Gestalt approach really makes very religious is this whole idea of breathing. Take a breath, and breath is actually a transformational event, and it's behind everything. So in this moment, can you just say a few words, because you referenced vagus nerve, and I think many people reference it, but the power of what that is, and how that links everything together, and how that is really the ancient connection and the wisdom. Could you just say a few moments, and then go back to your integrations?
Okay. Well, the interesting thing, if you look at a fetus, the nervous system is like boop, this big ball, okay? And as the fetus grows, the nervous system starts to separate and is fully connected by this thing called the vagus nerve. And it separates out, and then we have the gut connected to it, the heart and the brain. But it's one. It's really one organ. We forget that. We think the brain operates separately, but it doesn't, because it's got this huge nerve called the vagus nerve that connects the pieces of this one organ called the nervous system. And so as we receive with our gut and we receive with our heart, which we do, they're like radio we pick things up like a radio station. But it doesn't have language. The brain has language, so it constantly sends signals up to the brain, and then the brain interprets and we hear it from our brain. But the more you can just sense, like I just got a hit. So when I gave you that example of the manager who looked down and said, "But I thought she'd be the one," I felt his sadness here. That's what stopped me to say, hold on a second. I want to go back to that. It was like my heart just got really heavy. And so when I sense that, I don't know exactly what it is, and I don't need to know. I just need to share. I sense you feel fear in your gut. It's like, whoa, so what stopped you in that moment? You're going to feel like a block in your gut, or a grabbing of your heart. Or if they're embarrassed or they're shamed, there'll be this heaviness. And you just ask about it. And this is what I'm sensing. And you can be wrong. It doesn't matter. It's creating an awareness, because then they'll say, no, that's not it. This is it. And now you've taken them to a deeper place. So we do use our emotions to open up these centers. So we know in coaching to be curious, and curiosity is an emotion. It's not an opinion. It's that full sense of, I'm really curious. So I'm really curious, and to feel curiosity. But then before we go in, and to remember as we get stuck, to open our hearts, with gratitude, with compassion. So I work for male-dominated companies for 11 of my years that I work for companies, and I'm a gut-based person, but I closed my heart down for years. And it was my work, actually in improv acting, where my teacher taught me to open up my heart, that it was safe. But I know that's my weak spot. So when I get stuck in coaching, I remember how grateful I am to be there and how much I care about my client. And it's amazing what will come forth. So we use compassion, gratitude to open our heart, and then courage to open our gut. So before we even go into coaching, we want to align and open our nervous system. And then when we start to feel a little uncomfortable, our own discomfort, where are you shutting down? And you'll know, because I want to come to this thing. That's not what I was looking for. Okay, well.
What are you looking for, Marcia? Tell us.
That. You will have a dominant and a secondary. So I told you that my dominant was, all of us had the head. But many coaches, their secondary is their heart, and then they have trouble with, I don't know, I was afraid to say that. So they have trouble with courage. But there's those of us that are risk takers that have more trouble with our hearts than our guts. So my request for you is as you're going out and just practice listening, not to not even just in coaching, but just to notice like what's easier for you, to open up your gut or open up your heart, what shuts down. And in a difficult conversation, you can notice, like, are you really listening from your heart? Can you access your gut? The exercise that I do with my coaches, actually, if you go to my website, outsmartyourbrain.com, under Discomfort Zone, there's a visualization that will help you to open up your head, your heart, and your gut. And often when I work with coaches, I have them, we just work on one at a time. And then I have them listen just from their heart, and see what comes up, see what questions come up. And then I have them listen from their gut and see what they notice. And you can do this even by going for a walk and see what you notice through your heart or notice through your gut. And they always tell me they can, which one was harder. It's like, I can sense my heart, but I don't know where my gut is. I love that question. Where's my gut? I'm like, they say it's right below your navel. But just that grounding, centering space, it doesn't really matter exactly where that is, but you'll know which is easier for you to open and what you need to work on. And so this is like the first step, is just to start noticing how easy it is to open from your heart or your gut. So what I had said was then, and then when you ask this, that's the baby stare, and then you ask the question and they give you that stare, and then you have that reaction. And the reaction, again, like I said, is an indication of learning. And so that's a good space. But the thing is that I use the terminology to hold the space. And I often get questions about that. What do you mean holding a space? And that's where what I was saying about when you open your head and your heart and your gut, not only do you take things in, but there's all this work that's they've been doing with therapists that work with trauma patients, trauma victims, who have for much of their life even haven't been able to speak of that moment that created the trauma. And they're finding this amazing thing that when the therapists open with their head and their heart and their gut, that there's this like energetic exchange, that the person is like willing to talk about this thing for the first time in their lives because they feel safe enough. And so there's this woman, Sherry Geller, actually I think it's out of Toronto, I think.
Yes, she is. I met her.
You did? Was she wonderful?
Yes and yes.
I would so love to meet her. I have to come up there. It's
Yes.
just, it's incredible the work she's doing in measuring presence and the energetic exchange. And what happens. And so I always say mastery in coaching is the deepening of presence, not the perfection of skills. So what can you do to open your nervous system and deepen your presence? Because that creates that full body presence that the person feels. And so they're more willing to explore how they see themselves in the world with you. And will go there and will feel, when you create even a bit of discomfort, that it's okay. Because it's all in this process that we're creating. So in discomfort zone conversations, there is this intention of emotions. And I always say at least that sense of curiosity and care. That if we go into the conversation remembering to feel this way, and especially if you're busy, it's a crazy day, to stop and to center yourself with your emotions. And then you open your head, your heart, and your gut, and that's an alignment, so you're fully present with your clients, which then allows you to receive. Empathy, again, isn't understanding how they experience, it's really sensing what they're experiencing. And so you receive it. I've gotten to the point where I don't even say the word listening that much. I say receiving. You're receiving from them and then giving it back. Coaching is really a matter of receiving and giving back. Now, we don't have to think it through. We don't analyze it. We're not trying to figure it out. We're just receiving it and giving it back. And that magic moment, Dorothy, that you said, that moment of magic is created, that we have to trust, that we don't have to be so brilliant. We just have to be open, receive it, and offer it. We invite them to explore what we just sensed, what we just picked up, and see what emerges. And we hold the space and we hold the direction. So if they start to go off track, we say, well, I thought this is what we were working on. Are we still working on this outcome, this agreement that we made? And we keep them on track because they're not comfortable with emotions, so they may try to run away a little bit. So we kind of hold them in that space. So when you look at the ICF competencies, that when we first work with them, that it's really important that how present we are and that we really hear. We don't just run with their problem and their topic. We really, really try to understand what is it that this person really wants and needs in this moment, which requires a bit of that presence and the trust and intimacy that we're going to create through our presence. And then, we drop down into that full receiving and giving back and questioning what does that mean to the person, and using their words. So you use this word 3 times. What does that mean to you? So using the direct communications as a reflective. This is a reflective inquiry process, not just an inquiry process, which then creates the new awareness. But then we have them articulate what the new awareness is, and then we build the action plans and look at whatever support they need in order to move forward based on the awareness that they now have. And that's just how this fits into the competencies that have held to this day. I was a part of the group at the very beginning that creating the competencies, and I really believe we channeled. They were pretty amazing. So the point of coaching is that we're trying to get them to stop and think about what they think and what they feel. And we ask questions so they question themselves. And then we help them articulate what else could be true and possible. And that's the point. That simply is, to me, the brilliance of coaching and how it stands out as a behavioral technology that truly is going to, I believe, stand the test of time because of the difference it can make. So the 2 things that I like to leave people with is the first thing what I said to you is mastery is truly the deepening of presence. So we learn our, like when you play the piano, you learn your scales and then you can improvise. So yes, you must go to and learn your basic skills and how to apply them. We learn that in school. But then to know it enough to forget it so we can be fully present. So mastery is the deepening of presence, and to remember honestly that they really want you to be present more than they need you to be perfect. You don't have to be perfect. I don't know a perfect coach. Maybe Dorothy, you're perfect. I'm not. But I don't even know what perfection would mean when it comes to coaching. So the point is, how present can you be? Because that's honoring the soul of this creative, whole, resourceful person that's sitting in front of you. And that's, to me, the brilliance of coaching. So with that, I want to know if there's any final questions.
Marcia, one of the things, Gustava had said about, just the act of being curious is what the great Irving Yalom had said is having like big rabbit ears.
Yeah.
Really listening in that big way. Very, very interesting, Marcia, because
I just want to say, so I live in Arizona and we have these things called jackrabbits.
Yeah.
That actually have big giant ears. So when you say that, it's like, yeah, I'm hiking this afternoon. I'll see some of those rabbits with giant ears.
I want to give an opportunity for everyone to say a thought or a word as we close. But one question I have is, when a person, a coach, really is aware of their own discomfort in service of where the client is, how have you found, there's Jung said that there's gold, in darkness. The alchemy is to go into the dark places. And the alchemy of a coach is when you feel that moment of discomfort in yourself, either you're cognitively stuck or your compassion is reduced, or someone has pressed your triggers, or their triggers have been pressed in your triggers. How do you deepen your presence in that moment so you come back with more compassion, more curiosity, more courage?
Yeah. Years ago, I was asked to work with a sports psychologist on how to be in the zone, just so people can apply it to their work. And I'm so glad, because I learned, these top athletes that I interviewed, like, how do they get in that place to where there's billions of people watching and it's game's up to them? And you were absolutely right what you said before. The first thing is to breathe. You activate your parasympathetic nervous system. It starts to release with the exhale. And then the steps where we breathe and do a quick body scan and relax your tension. Don't do it with affirmations or try to change your brain until your body's relaxed, because it's not going to work. So we breathe, we release the tension, clear our mind, and then center yourself. So many places when I work with leaders, and I'd say, if you've never taken yoga or martial art, you need to know where the center of your body is, your core, because you drop your awareness here. And that's what all the athletes said, that they learned to drop their awareness to the center of their body. In martial arts, this is your point of strength. This is your will to move forward. So that awareness in your gut, your center, get you out of your head. And then, because we're humans, we need to implant. And I always say, it's not a thought, it's an emotion. So what is it you want to feel? So you can have 2 words, that's it. So for me, it's curious and care. I'm curious and I care. So I come back to feeling curious and care. For some of the coaches I work with, because their gut is difficult for them, and for them it could be, I'm curious and I'm courageous. Whatever it is, I'm calm and curious, whatever it is for you, but to implant how you want to feel. And then it just opens up the channel again. So it's relax, detach, relax your body, clear your brain, and quickly drop your awareness to the center of your body. And then choose how you want to feel in that moment. And it's amazing. how then you will then be able to hold that space for them to go through their discomfort as they're unsure of what they feel, because that's where they will grow. That's when learning occurs, and that's when they will grow. So, and I gave you that, this is the link, because again, there's all kinds of things. There's the model, there's the visualization, there's just all kinds of things. There's a video that shows how this goes on in the brain, just all kinds of resources that you can use to help you, again, remind you how this really works, because it's important that we have this when we teach people why coaching is so important to me, the human development, which we sorely need on this planet. So that's it.
I want to just invite everyone to just feel not just my appreciation for turning up to this session with Marcia, but this wonderful opportunity to really sit in the presence of a very modest master with courage, with compassion, and with curiosity, always curiosity, Marcia. You're the most curious person. And that's one of the things that so draws me to you, with love. And here's my question. I always say, well, what are you doing now? what are you doing now? And the conversation just goes off from that unscripted into the next. And for everyone who's on this call today, you're going to be getting an audio of this session, which includes these wonderful slides. I just have found it very fascinating. And I have to really give a shout out to the Discomfort Zone, which, how many languages has it been translated into now?
I think 3.
Okay.
It's Russian, in Chinese, it's in Russian, and there was something else. I can't remember. Some odd language.
I love showing off on you, because it shows how the human being across the world, really, we're all in the service of how can we learn. And there are universal issues when you really tap into the brain and the universals of being uncomfortable with new learning. You've humanized this important state that we all recognize. And for everyone on the call, I know that we are out of time, but you're in time, that you were here. And it's Valentine's Day, and someone said to me, how could you do this on Valentine's Day? So I'd like to say, it's because of you, Marcia. It's because you have such love for the field. And it's so interesting. You heard Marcia just say she was one of that group that came up with the ICF core competencies. And I do have to say, Marcia, that is a wow, that something like that endures and continues to make us work to figure it out. Now, I just have to laugh at what you've done with the group. And so I thank you. I want to encourage everyone to really go to these 2 excellent sites that Marcia has put so much information. I know that there's a place to contact you at. I do want to give a shout out for the Discomfort Zone and actually for Wonder Woman, which is just killing everybody now in the era of Me Too. Wonder Woman is speaking to women that don't have to wonder anymore about their wandering. It's just this has been too good. Just let's hear a word from anyone who wants to shout out now. Unmute yourself for a moment. We have a minute. Unmute, Tim, if everyone could be unmuted for a minute for closing with our dear Marcia.
Thank you, Marcia. Excellent message, and you just give relief to everybody. Just to know that we have to only be present. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And thank you from Ankara, Turkey. It was an honor to meet you, Marcia. And Dorothy, nice to see you again once more. Love you.
Love you back.
Thank you, Marcia and Dorothy from New Mexico.
My neighbor. Great.
I want to thank you. I'm glad to share some ideas as curiosity and being in presence. I like that too much. So thanks a lot from Uruguay.
Excellent.
Hi, this is Jackie from Toronto. I feel very curious, very grateful, and hopeful.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Hi, this is Fuad from Istanbul. I'm also grateful. Thank you.
Welcome. Great. Good.
Well, I don't know if there's anyone else.
Yes, me. I think very grateful, Marcia. I will go to your site now. I'm very curious about it, and I think my third is also curiosity, but about the second one, I'm not so sure. So, and thank you very much. And Dorothy, it's very nice to see you again.
Well,
And evening from me. I think it's not good evening for you at the moment, but.
well, somewhere in the world, I think really somewhere in the world, 38 countries. I think now you just were in the world today, Marcia. In the world. This is really, where is she? She's in the world. So everyone go well. Feel the, and, you know, I had a wonderful participant student friend. She always used to say this, feel the love. So feel the love, everyone. Thanks for joining us. The next session is in March. Marcia, again, thank you. Lots of love and lots of appreciation to all of you. We are together. We are strong. Mwah! Be well.
Thanks.
Feel
Bye.
everybody. Thank you, Tim, for the call driver. Thank you.
Bye.
And thank you, Dorothy.
Oh, my joy, my joy.
And my eyes are in good shape now.
I'm so glad because I see you.